So in the class on facing turbulence from a yoga perspective, what happened was just before class began, I was looking in the chat in the Zoom, and one of the students said how stressed and turbulent her life had felt, and other students were chatting in the Zoom in response to that. So I took it into my awareness that turbulence was a word that people were using, and that stress, of course, is a word everyone's using right now. And I have to consider then, here we are in the fall, the autumn season, Vata season. Who's in the class, as I said before in these director's notes, what are they facing in their lives? So these considerations come in, and I chose to address a sense of really grounding, rooting, using the legs and sometimes the specificity of the instruction to help the Vata mind know where to place itself. So for example, the sequence leads through some hip opening practices and different things, and it's leading to Parsvakanasana, the side angle pose. And I knew that when I got there, I would be asking the students, I didn't know this before class began, I just knew it when I was teaching through class, that I wanted to give them a place where what we might think of as the scientific part of the mind, the linear, logical, concentrating, attuned part of the mind would be able to say, okay, big toe mound, inner arch, heel, outer heel, and really trace these actions and these lines to find a sense of the deep stability, the stabilization that we can cultivate for ourselves. And that stabilization has to be in the physical body, but also in the mental body, in the mind, in the concentration. And I wanted that to come before we extended the upper arm into the pose, before we could sense, okay, now how shall we reach? How shall we express ourselves? What's going to happen here? I also chose to use the analogy of a lighthouse and to keep coming back to that analogy during the class, that we are a lighthouse unto ourselves, for ourselves. There's a part of us, actually not even a part, it's like the largest aspect of who we are is that lighthouse, witness, presence, stability, the abiding nature. And then there's the parts of us that are out on the ocean of the turbulence of life. And we're out there navigating the waves, and sometimes the waves are more calm, and sometimes they're like big swells. And in a big swell, the boat that's on the ocean, each time that the swell happens, it will lose a moment of connection to the lighthouse. But when the swell recedes, if the beam has been steady, the boat and the people on the boat will know where they are relative to the shore. So I was using this analogy throughout class, and I wanted the students to sense that the lighthouse that each of us is really only possible because our teachers and our teachers' teachers, they've also had that lighthouse, that which they've been able to tap into and then to kind of usher through, or to be a vessel for these wisdom teachings. And the wisdom teachings are not only scientific, so there's also a mystical. So I like to say yoga is a scientific and a mystical path. It's both of these things. It's more than that too, but the scientific part you'll see in this class on how I'm telling them to direct their attention in the physical asana. And the mystical part is like, oh, there's a larger force, and it wants to borrow you and all of us to come through. How can we allow that to happen? Well, we can't really allow it to happen if the residue in the body, the ama, is sort of clogging the line. So we do have to get this moved through the physical body in this way. I also took the class into some seated hip opening poses using the 2 blocks. And I do that because the pelvis can really identify where stable ground is, because the pelvis on the blocks, the sitting bones, are giving you a sense of like, okay, here I am. This is my place, this is what I'm doing. And then the compromising can be reduced so people can really sense between right side, left side, what's actually happening in their pelvis. And I wanted to take us down from the block work where we're sitting on the blocks down to the floor, where we use the blocks then for this myofascial release pattern, this like pressure point spot where the blocks are against first the inner edge of the sacrum where it meets the ilium, and then we're just behind the trochanter, between the trochanter and the ilium, and then we're at the outer trochanter, and then we're down. And I really wanted that to be a way to have students experience the grounding, the surrender, the letting go of the legs. And when the legs get heavy like that, how the mind has a place to go down, to rest. So my hope was that that part of class, that physical part of class, would lead them away from the scientific mind thinking, and having to concentrate, and kind of usher them into the mystical heart to rest there in Shavasana. So I'll actually be repeating that sequence, that hip sequence with the 2 blocks lying on the floor. I think I'm going to be doing that again on a regular basis because the students after class reported that it was really successful for them. And we do need to be taking care that everyone in a time of stress and turbulence, our systems are wired together so we can sense how each other is responding, and also in the ecosystem that is you, your physiological, neurological, musculoskeletal you is also experiencing stress and tension from the pelvic floor to these small muscle insertions, the deep six, the sacrum, the ligaments and tendons of the body, and up the psoas to the diaphragm and so on, up towards the mind, the brain, I should say. The brainstem. So getting these messages going upstream rapidly to say stress, 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 and how do we help that to turn back where the brain, the gut, the pelvic floor, the legs can say, okay, and there's also this mystical path, and there's this opportunity for being grounded and finding healing, even in these incredibly uncertain and turbulent times when our ancestor yogis over many generations stayed committed. They too were facing uncertain and turbulent times in their own way. So their fortitude and commitment is how we have access to yoga today. So we're in a way, we're required, compelled, invited, encouraged to do the same. Okay, hope you enjoy the class. You can check it out. I'll put the link below for where that class can be found. And let me know if you have any questions about what I'm saying here on these director's notes. Okay, namaste.